pleasure today to introduce our two presenters to discuss the first steps in future planning. Expressing future wishes will be discussed by Hae-Young Jong, who is the Director of Outreach and Advocacy at the ARC of King County in Washington State. And discussing financial planning will be Andy Hook, who is an attorney and a member of the Special Needs Alliance. He's the president of the Hook Law Center in Virginia, and we want to thank SNA, the Special Needs Alliance, for being a promotional partner of the ARC. So without taking up any more of our time, I will turn things over to Hae-Young.
Hi, Robin. Thank you so much for having me and presenting at this webinar. Hello again. My name is Hae-Young Jung, and thank you for having me. My presentation will be about 15 minutes, and I will do an overview of how our chapter, ARC chapter, provides information related to future planning in the context of our day-to-day program activities and help families to think about and develop future planning. At the end of my presentation, I will review some of the resources that our chapter developed or that we utilize, the ones that other chapters developed. And I hope some of these examples will be a good reference for other chapters to use and develop their own materials. I am trying to move to the next slide. It's not moving. See. Oh, there you go. So the first slide, it's an overview of our model of practical assistant at the ARC of King County. At our chapter, we do not have a program or project called future planning. However, we do provide information, assistance, and opportunities for families to think about their future wishes for their loved ones with developmental disabilities. The future planning assistant is integrated in our overall program activities and offered in multifaceted ways and approaches. We provide assistance from wherever families find us. Our model of practical assistance is through one-on-one informational consultation. That will be the first bubble that you see the diagram. And then occasionally provide additional follow-up. That sometimes happen at their own homes. We have to travel to meet senior families or make multiple contacts over a long period of time. Providing ready-to-access resource guide where families can find information on their own when they need those information from our website. And informational workshop and trainings, seminars, as well as networking gatherings. So next, this slide shows the importance of considering culture and language accessibility in all aspects of our program activities. At our chapter, we have 4 staff who are bilingual in Somali, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean. And we have 1 designated staff for African American family support and outreach. We also utilize language line support and community interpreters as needed base. And we work with other expert organizations such as Chinese Information Support Center for, working with Chinese families, as we do not have the language capacity at our chapter. We have monthly gatherings for 4 cultural communities where meetings are facilitated by the staff who represent each cultural community. And the sessions are done in their language of origin. Information and referral assistance is the entry point for families to find us. The first component of this model is almost no one finds us and contact us, calling us asking, I want to do future planning, can you help me? The reality is the kind of question that we hear is more towards specific resources, such as special needs trust, guardianship, or housing resources. We do respond to those specific questions and inquiries first, And then we offer related and additional information that might help them to think about future planning. We invite them to future training seminars or gatherings. Informational assistance is a great entry point for families to get to know us and trust us in our expertise and our connection to the expert speakers. This slide shows some of the top topics that people call us to seek information. Life transition, recreation activities, guardianship, wills and trust, housing, how to find support, how to access support, and developmental disability specific services and public benefits. As I mentioned, some situations we need to provide additional support, especially when the situations and life transitions are challenging and complex. It is extremely important that we provide information in digestible chunks instead of dump whole information all at once. Later in the presentation, I will share the Future Planning Organizer. It's a great tool for us as a step at the chapter to provide information in a way that we don't overwhelm families, but give them an overview framework and a tool they can refer to later on. Informational workshop is a great opportunity for families to come to a training and learn together. Also meet others and hear others' life stories and journeys. Topics mirror the topics that we hear from information and referral assistance. The unique training that we do is Facing the Future Together. This is a partnership with local chapter of the Lifespan of Washington, and they provide a training where senior parents and siblings can start the first conversation about the future. I'm going to briefly, I may skip this link. You can click this link later and see our community calendar where we updated our up-to-date trainings and opportunity on our website. I'm going to go to the Ready to Access Resource Guide. Again, this component of assistance is where we recognize more and more families are connected to internet and utilize web-based resources. I'm going to share some of the samples of these resources later in the presentation. So here I feature 6 samples of some of the resources that we utilize. I'm going to click the first one, Future Planning Organizer. All of these are available on our website, by the way. So the first one is the Future Planning Organizer, and second one is YouTube video clips. It's produced by our state ARC chapter, and we utilize. And next one is the guardianship and Social Security, Special Needs Trust, and housing resources. So I'm going to feature the first one, Future Planning Organizer. I hope you all can see from your computer screen. This is available on our website. You can download for your families or develop your own material. You can pick and choose the area that you like. So this is a cover page where they can put their name. And this is all about me, and they can put their name of the loved one with developmental disability and things they like and they don't like, and daily activities, what their typical day looks like, right? The next one is Guides for Supporting My Independence. So if you are working with supportive living providers, or if you have a Medicaid personal care providers, or if you have a privately paid someone helping you to take care of your loved ones, some of these informations are very helpful if they can take a look at it and get to know the loved one, and all the ideas and information and special tricks that we have to best support our loved ones can be shared with whoever we hire to share the care. And the money management and all other great topics here. And communication, how do I communicate? How do you know I'm happy? How do you know I'm sad? How do you know I'm angry? How do you know I'm tired? So these are important information and relationship about who's in the core of the relationship. At my Boost Club, the critical thing is put the pictures here. Sometimes it's very hard.
Hey, Bobby.
Hello? So pictures will be very helpful with the contact information. So I'm going to skip this one for you to explore later from our website. And then the next one is the YouTube video clip. This is developed by Washington State ARC. The state chapter developed this wonderful material, and local chapters like us utilize and disseminate this wonderful, YouTube information. The next one is guardianship. This is something our chapter developed with the help with attorneys. Next one is about Social Security. Some of the questions that people have, it's a very direct way of explaining the very complex information. And the next one is a Special Needs Trust. I have another one on housing. I'm not sure whether you can help me with that. Okay, so maybe that's the one can be shared later. So that the housing one is the stories of different families have come up with creative housing solution. It's a wonderful story. Sometimes it's not all about resources. Knowing what other families have done creatively in the context of their own family, situations and resources in their community resources is just a wonderful way to be inspired and replicate. So that's all I have for my presentation. Robin, should I hand it over to Andy?
Thank you, Hae Young, for that very informative presentation. And we will now hear from Andy Hook, who will give us more detail on the financial planning and special needs trust aspect of our webinar.
Well, this is where it's going to get interesting, and I will tell you why it's interesting is because the web is going down in my office, and I've got a blank screen that I'm looking at rather than your webinar. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak from my memory about what the slides are, and that's the old plan of no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. The topic of the presentation this afternoon really were special needs trust. And what is a special needs trust? It is really is an arrangement or it's an agreement for the management of assets with persons with special needs. And there are other tools that can be used. One that immediately comes to mind is one that isn't even in existence at the moment, but has passed the House and will shortly be acted on by the Senate and hopefully pass as an ABLE account, which is similar to a 529 plan. Other arrangements that do exist today certainly would be guardianships and conservatorships, for example, powers of attorney. All are arrangements for the management of persons' affairs that have special needs. Now, the question is where and why do our special needs trusts become very important? And the reason in that when you're doing your planning, in most cases, people need a very comprehensive solution. In addition to being a lawyer, I'm a certified financial planner, and the reason for that is because really when we're sitting down and looking at people's resources, certainly what are the sources of that help? And it can be private resources, in other words, their own savings, their own income, or family savings or family income. It may be public benefits that are necessary. It could be insurance. So there are many different sources where you may need to look for assistance. But frequently, in most cases, people are not going to be able to completely ignore the use of public benefits such as SSI, maybe it's Social Security disability income, it may be Medicare, and it can be Medicaid. There's some of these public benefits, such as SSI and Medicaid, immediately come to mind. There are others, such as housing vouchers and food stamps, have both income and they have resource eligibility rules. And they're only available if you meet those very strict rules. For example, on SSI, the accountable resources limits are $2,000, very low income rules. And so the idea of the Special Needs Trust was created, and it was initially created for the self-created ones in 1993 under a budget bill that was passed in 1993 on the self-created ones. In other words, you're using the assets of the disabled person. It's been long under the SSI and Social Security Administration rules for the third-party trust. But these were means by which assets could be available for the benefit of a person with special needs, but not make them ineligible for the public means-tested public benefits. Now, when you begin talking about special needs trusts, there are really two different distinct types. One of them, what I will call a third-party special needs trust, and a third-party special needs trust is a trust created with the funds of a person other than the person with special needs. For example, it could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, a brother or a sister could create the trust and would fund it with assets. What we find is very common is to have a parent or grandparent create a third-party special needs trust, which may be funded by many members of the family. It's a way they hold down their expenses, and they can, in other words, they get a very well-crafted special needs trust, and then all of them begin making contributions into the trust. The other type of special needs trust that you hear about is really the first-party special needs trust, and that's going to be a special needs trust funded with the assets of a person with a disability. We find those most commonly used when the person with special needs gets a injury award or maybe an inheritance from a family member that didn't realize that the gift would cause them, the family member or the person with special needs, to be ineligible for the public benefits. Now, provided that that person with special needs is under the age of 65, Congress has specifically authorized the creation of what's called a first-party special needs trust. Well, the interesting thing is, back is we've got the internet back up, and I've got this back up on my screen, and I see that we're talking about that. It's on there. Now, the major difference, as you can see, between a first-party special needs trust and the third-party special needs trust is not only who creates it, but really is the Medicaid payback provision. The Medicaid payback provision says at the death of a person with special needs, that any Medicaid benefits that have been extended by the state to the beneficiary during the beneficiary's lifetime have to be repaid to the state. Now, what's interesting, if you know about the ABLE accounts that may be passed by Congress, it has a similar Medicaid payback provision, which says that assets remaining in the trust at the beneficiary's death have to be paid to the state. Now, that's a major difference from the third-party special needs trust, which have no similar payback provision. The other type of first-party trust, in other words, trust created with the assets of the person with special needs, is the pool trust. And a pool trust is a special needs trust, but it's created not by trust agreement, but it's created by joinder agreement. In other words, there's a master trust agreement that's created by a charity, and then persons with special needs or their parent or grandparent, guardian, or court can enter into a joinder agreement on behalf of the person with special needs, and the person with special needs funds can be deposited in the pool trust by the charity for the benefit of the person with special needs. Once again, trust would not be considered a resource for public benefits purposes. There is a difference at death. At death, it permits the pool trust to do one of two things. The pool trust could keep all the remaining account balance for the benefit of other persons with special needs who are beneficiaries of the pool trust, or it could provide that there would be a payback to the state with any excess over and above what had to be repaid to would be distributed to the beneficiaries. Now, I tell people, what is one of the most important things that you really need to consider when you enter into any arrangement? We can have the best trust, power of attorney, you name it, in there, but if you've got the wrong person doing the management, you're probably going to have a bad result. And so picking your trustee is going to be absolutely critical, and a lot of thought and consideration not only should be going to the legal document, but to who the manager is going to be. And when you look at that ideal trustee, you'll look at there's a couple of things you need to think about. One is we need somebody that is going to be an effective advocate on behalf of the beneficiary. And that's going to put the beneficiary's interest ahead of all others. In other words, a trustee is a fiduciary. And as a fiduciary, they should put the needs of the beneficiary ahead of their own interest or the interest of others. Unfortunately, sometimes we find trustees got conflicts of interest, and as a result of that, the beneficiary sometimes comes out short. The other thing the ideal trustee would have, if he's going to be an effective advocate, he must understand public benefits. He must understand, frankly, trust and estates laws. And he must be an effective advocate to make sure that the beneficiary receives the benefits to which they're entitled and prevent abuse, prevent people from taking advantage or abusing the beneficiary. There is the accountable. Absolutely, as a fiduciary, they've got to keep records, got to be able to provide accountings, and consideration should be given to requiring a bond and a surety. What is a surety bond? A surety bond is really an insurance policy saying if the trustee makes a mistake or makes an intentional error, that the insurance company will make it good. And when you got assets for a person with special needs that are often irreplaceable, having an insurance policy, I think, should be strongly considered. Yes, it's an expense, but it may be just as you insure your car, you insure your house, may be a very justified expense. Additionally, the trustee's got to have some financial savvy. Got to invest the money to make sure they get a reasonable rate of return, but on the other hand, not take unnecessary risk, and has got to understand the tax laws. The tax laws will be not only the laws that apply to the beneficiary, but they're going to also make sure they understand the fiduciary income tax rules, will be the tax rules which apply to the trust, which are different than those that apply to individuals. Now, when we look at the management of a first party or even I'll even say a third party trust, you got a couple options. One is you looked at that twice a moment ago, finding that ideal trustee. Maybe we could find a corporate fiduciary that may be ideal, that understand the tax laws, understand the rules, maybe understand investment rules, but they may not be as savvy, perhaps with public benefits. They may not be as savvy as understanding all the needs of that particular beneficiary. So one response maybe we'll just designate a family member, maybe, or a friend or whomever as a co-trustee. Well, I guess that could be one way to go about doing it. Perhaps other more modern ways to go about it is to appoint a trust advisory committee, which would be a group of people that could advise, instruct. Under modern trust law, you could even have the trust advisory committee could instruct the trust, for example, trustee, when to make distributions and when not to make distributions and who to make distributions on behalf of the beneficiary. Instead of a whole committee of people, maybe that acted by majority, you could have a single person, and that could direct the trustee, and that typically would be called a trust protector or a trust advisor. A tool that we like to use, and I like to use in my special needs trust, is to specifically recommend and authorize the trustee to hire care managers to work for the trustee on behalf of the beneficiary. And I find having a care manager that can be very available to the beneficiary is very helpful. And typically these care managers are going to be have in-depth knowledge with regards to the resources that are available to the beneficiary, to have develop in-depth knowledge of the needs of the beneficiary over time. Now, the limited purpose trust would be it'll give you an example of an option to consider. There are occasions, for example, that you want to just provide housing for a beneficiary. And maybe the only or principal assets of that trust is going to be a special needs trust, for example, to hold housing for the beneficiary, maybe with modest other assets that are available. So that would be the purpose of the trust would be there for that limited purpose of providing housing. Now, funding the special needs trust. Now, that's where I find frequently too little consideration is given by professionals. What, in many cases, I know when we're meeting with a family, and I've got the parents there, and there's a child with special needs, and we've got and they've got other children. And what's the natural, or what happened frequently in estate planning? Well, we say we got 3 kids, I'm going to give 1/3 children. Well, that certainly is, I'm guessing with all children having equal needs and equal affection for the parent, that would be maybe appropriate. But however, when we have a child with special needs, there is a child with a greater need. So frequently what I'd like to do is I'd like to sit down and really develop a financial plan for that beneficiary. To sit down, and when we're doing an estate plan, we like to sit down and think about what would happen if the parents, for example, were to die within the next 5 years. What is the child's life expectancy? What would their needs be during that life expectancy? Try to develop a present value for those needs over their remaining life expectancy. What would be the public benefits that would be available to the beneficiary over their lifetime? Try to develop a present value for those public benefits. Then subtract the public benefits from the needs, and then you're going to see there's going to be a difference, and that difference is what we would need to find a way to try to fund using the special needs trust. And what we also need to do, because the world is an uncertain place, we need to factor in when we're doing that, what happens if public benefits rules change? What happens if the needs of the child change? What happens if the investments that we have in the trust don't perform quite as well as what we've expected? So I try to round up. And in a perfect world, there would be an ability, maybe with a life insurance policy, maybe with allocating a larger percentage of the estate to the trust, that we can meet those particular needs. So funding the special needs trust and figuring out what is the amount that should go in, as much consideration as we're giving to our trustee, the manager, that's another area that we need to spend and give a lot of consideration to. They're managing gifts. Now, over and over again, frankly, I find an error that is made is, yes, perhaps we got a person with special needs. Yes, perhaps their parents understand the needs of protecting the gifts and making sure they don't disqualify their child for public benefits. But do the grandparents, do siblings, do aunts and uncles all understand this? And the word needs to be disseminated through the family, and that's why frequently we will see third-party special needs trust that's developed maybe with the parents or the grandparents, and then ask any family member that wishes to make a gift to the child with special needs, make it to the trustee of the special needs trust. So that's really an important part of the family education, to make sure gifts are directed to the trust. Now, where can you get additional information? Because I know I've been speaking there, I guess, for about 15 minutes, and we're going on to 20 minutes, and As you can see, that's just a brief summary. Well, one of the places that you can go to get that help is from the Members of Special Needs Alliance, which are national experts. It's a nonprofit organization committed to helping individuals with disabilities and their families. They're members of that alliance in most of the major cities and in the vast majority of all the states. One of the places, if you will go to their website, I think you'll find that it's a wonderful resource in itself. Locate a local attorney that could perhaps provide advice and assistance to you and get you started in doing that planning. Now, I think, ma'am, we're about ready to start our questions, and I apologize for the slight disruption at the beginning where the web went down on me, and hopefully it was fairly smooth.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andy. So we'll now take questions. You can either raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon, or you can post your questions into the chat box, and we'll read them out loud for you. Okay, great. Sheila in the chat box asks, how will the new savings accounts passed by the House of Representatives change the need for a third-party trust?
Good question. As we know, it's now before the Senate. I think there's a very high likelihood that it will be passed. Where do I see that if it is passed, where do I see that these accounts will be very, very helpful? In my opinion, they're going to be helpful where there is a relatively small amount. We got a person with special needs that are on public benefits, and where we've got a fairly small amount of money that we've got to shelter for their benefit, and we want to hold down the cost of getting the legal entity to hold it and the administration down. If you will look under the bill as it's currently passed, there's a limit on if you want to remain eligible in SSI to $100,000. You can remain on Medicaid in there up to the maximum amount that's permitted for 529 plans in your state, and that's $350,000 in Virginia. The major drawback, however, when we're really talking about third party, is that at the death of the beneficiary, funds have to be paid back to the state as a payback. So I think whenever you're going to get any significant gift, certainly $100,000 and up in my mind, you're probably going to, and the parents are going to want to create a third-party special needs trust so that at the death of their child, the assets that remain in the trust will be paid to other beneficiaries that they have rather than being used as a payback to the estate. That's my take on it. Any other questions?
Great, thank you. And then we have another question in the chat box that says, Social Security Administration officials indicated to me that a special needs trust, once drafted, can be sent to the SSA for pre-approval for compliance. Have you experienced this?
Pre-approval for compliance. Well, no. Typically what I will do, and it's in there, is as soon as they have been created, if the beneficiary is on public benefits, I immediately submit it to the Social Security Administration for their approval. If they were to turn it down, most of the special needs trusts that I draft, and I think most of my colleagues draft, have amendment provisions in there. So if they came up and for some reason they had something new that we hadn't seen before, amend the trust so that we go into compliance with using the amendments. On occasion in the past, I have just started off with a very modest amount of money that's in the trust and submitted call it a trust with seed money to the Social Security Administration for their approval, then only fully funded it later after it had been approved. But just to submit it in draft format, I guess that's what I'm hearing, pre-approval. I've never seen just a draft submitted. It's always been a completed trust, fully or partially funded.
Thank you, Andy. This next question is for Hae Young. Can you talk a bit more about how to use the planner and organizer in meetings with families as they plan for the future?
Yes. Every family's question and situation, are different. Every now and then, we have families come here who never utilize any public services. So the conversation starts from very beginning, as if we are talking to a new parent with a new baby with developmental disability who never thought about, who never heard about developmental disability services. So you can imagine the level of the amount of information and the level of complexity in the information that we need to deliver to these families in life transition, major life transition, such as one of the senior parents passed away and the other parents in their 70s, or other sibling emerge and trying to learn the system. Just so much information. It's really hard to put all this information in one place. So what we usually do is respond to the very specific question they ask, but share this organizer that has all the information in an organized way, and we kind of go over it briefly and ask them to kind of look at it in their own time and think about it. What it does is when they look at different topics and themes like personal care, employment services, when they look at those terminology, different pages, they ask us again, what is this? How can I access this? How can I access that? So it gives us a little platform for us to have an organized conversation, but in their own time, in their own speed, in their own terms.
Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Catherine. She asks, I've never heard of care managers before, but that sounds like a good solution for us. With no family in our state to care for our son, where would we find them? Are they the same people as case managers for the Medicaid waiver programs? I'm in Indiana.
They may very well be. I will typically look for a social worker, like maybe a licensed clinical social worker. I'll look at people that are that have similar skills. I use geriatric care managers on occasion, and yes, you could use somebody that was a good case manager for the Medicaid waiver services. So, and I found them to be extremely helpful in making sure that the beneficiary has access to all services that may be available. I'm thinking of one where I'm the trustee, where the beneficiary is actually in Missouri and needed a lot of dental work, and making sure that a dentist was retained and the beneficiary got all the dental services they needed, and that the bills that I were getting were all appropriate and the services were rendered before I paid them.
Okay, thank you. The next question that we received in the chat box reads, what's the benefit of using attorneys from the Special Needs Alliance versus using local attorneys at private firms?
Well, the one advantage of the Special Needs Alliance is in there is an organization that you have to be invited to belong to, and at least they've been vetted on a national basis as having a comprehensive knowledge of special needs planning. There may be, and I'm sure there are other good attorneys in private practice out there that are very knowledgeable and you may have screened, they have or great referral in, you know that they're good, so there would be no disadvantage to using them. But it's just when you're using the Special Needs Alliance, you know that it's a group of it's an organization that has done the screening for you, and that the members should be screened as having this comprehensive, in-depth knowledge of special needs planning.
Thank you. Our next question is for Hei Young. Families can get stuck when making plans or procrastinate when doing so. How do you keep families engaged and moving forward with making plans?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I'm probably the worst example of all. I'm a sibling, and one way that we try every possible way. And then what we have learned is we really cannot force anybody to do anything unless they are ready to do it, they want to do it. The motivation should start from families. Sometimes it's a family dynamic and family context. It's very hard for any families to start this conversation unless they're in a place where such conversation happen naturally already. So possible ways that we facilitate this dilemma is offering regular workshops, seminars, and gatherings so that there is a multiple and ongoing opportunities where families can come and start thinking about it or hear others' family stories or start doing about it, but one little steps at a time. So one good example is the Facing the Future Together workshop. We do it twice a year. Every year, it's been about 4 years. It's an all-day training and a wonderful community leaders who have done a lot of future planning come and share personal stories. I think listening to those stories and meeting the family is very inspiring and motivating. It's less intimidating. It becomes doable. So my answer to that question is continue to offer multiple but different opportunities where families access and have kept inspired to think about this in a different way. And I think webinar like this is another opportunity that we couldn't do before. So again, you know, more options is better, more opportunities are better.
Wonderful, thank you. And our last question that in the chat box reads, if a family has sufficient assets to fund a special needs trust with personal funds, would funding the special needs trust with a life insurance policy be a better idea? What do you think about a special needs trust owning a home?
All right, so we've got a couple. If they've got sufficient assets, then the question is, I'm sorry about the insurance. I didn't understand that. Would you repeat the question?
Yes. If a family has sufficient assets to fund a special needs trust with personal funds, would funding the special needs trust with a life insurance policy be a better idea?
Well, the answer to, I think so. If they've got sufficient assets to fully fund it, there's no need to incur the expense, and there's always some expense whenever you make an investment, and one of the investments would be buying an insurance policy. There's no need to buy an insurance policy if they've otherwise got other assets such as mutual funds, cash, stocks, or bonds. I would use the life insurance when there wasn't sufficient other funds to do it, and we had to provide for an increase in the size of the estate at death. The other question is, what about a trust owning a special needs trust owning a home? Well, frequently that will happen because housing is a major need for people with special needs planning, and it's frequent that the trust has got the resources in which to buy the house, and then the trust will become the owner of the house and pay for the expenses with regards to the living expenses. It does mean that you're going to have a trust with a trustee's got the significant burden of making sure the house is insured, maintained, insured, and what have you. So you're going to need to make sure that you got a trustee that is appropriate to do that, or that you have a trust sufficiently large, not only that it can allocate the resources to buy the house and maintain it, but also to probably provide, hire the expert help that will be needed to adequately manage it.
We want to thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, we will be sending out the PowerPoint slides and the recording of this presentation in a follow-up email. We'll also be posting both of those to the Center for Future Planning website, which was launched earlier this week publicly. If you're interested in looking at the website, it has only a slightly different address than the email that you see in front of you. To get directly to the website, you go to futureplanning.thearc.org, and we hope you will visit it and share with us your feedback on it. In January of 2015, we are going to be hosting a webinar focused on siblings. We will be providing more detail of that in the next couple of weeks, but we understand that on December 10th, nobody is thinking about a webinar in January. So we want to thank you all for joining us today and wish you very happy holidays, and hope you will join us again in January to talk about siblings and throughout 2015 to address other topics related to future planning.